Mr. President,
The senator from Oklahoma.
I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business for 15 minutes.
Without objection.
I listened to parts of what Senator Reid had to say as we opened the Senate today, and I was struck by the fact that so many people are unemployed and our economy is still barely growing, that there probably is not any firm objections to trying to alleviate some of the pain by continuing a process where we lessen the tax burden through a decline in the Social Security tax. And I don't think that's going to be the issue with many senators. The question is do we do that by raising taxes on other people, or do we do that by getting rid of waste? And I had an interesting phone call today with somebody I trust and I've been talking to for 3 years, who has actually predicted everything that's happened so far. And he's predicted what's going to happen in Europe, and predicted the fact that ultimately there's going to be default in Europe on government bonds. There's going to be default. There's no way they grow themselves out of it. There's no way we loan them enough money to buy them enough time to get out of it. And the only way they get out of it is by trimming their spending, which they should have started 2.5 or 3 years ago. Well, the same lesson applies to us. So I think some things that are factual ought to be brought up. And we had, over this past week, the inability of the committee to come to agreement on $1.2 trillion. And so therefore, there's going to be a sequestration. But interesting thing on the way to the farm, when you have the sequestration carried out, there will be no decrease in spending of the federal government. This is an important thing I want the American people to hear. They think we're cutting spending. Defense will rise 16% with the sequestration. Non-defense discretionary will still rise 6%. Medicare will still rise 71%. Net interest will rise 160% with the sequestration. So it's dishonest, to put it mildly, to say that we're cutting anything in Washington. And there begs the problem. The problem is the political elite in this country is failing to make the adjustments that we have to make, or we're going to end up like Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and ultimately France. We have to do that. The sooner we do it, the less pain we're going to have. So the first thing we ought to do is be honest with the American people. Nobody has done anything in Washington yet to cut any spending, because spending's still going to rise both in discretionary and defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It's all going to rise, and so's interest. It's still going to rise. So we have to go back to the fundamental problem. What President Obama is proposing costs about $240 billion for next year. And I think he'd get great support from many of us if he said, I want to do this to help people out there, and I want to do it by getting rid of some of the waste, fraud, abuse, and duplication that we have. I'd be the first to help him. But that's not what's going to be proposed. Instead of playing the political game, why don't we actually solve the real problems? We had a GAO report that came out in March that showed massive